Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to another episode of Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. I am your host, VashSky, right here, and the one, the only, the great, the amazing, maybe even the iconic, I know he hates that word, Lou Wasserman's Ghost. What is going on, good sir?
Well, let's see. There's you and me and you out there who hopefully have a lot of interesting questions and comments and participate is what I'm trying to say. Don't just let us carry the water.
Yes, I would agree with that. By the way, if you want to send us your questions formally, you can go ahead and do that right here at t3ponline@yahoo.com. It's interesting, we actually do have a question here later on in this show that we are going to cover, so that is going to be pretty cool. But you go ahead and ask us in the chat. You can ask us on that email right there, and we'll get to your questions thusly.
And
oh, please.
We have an extra added feature we're going to begin with this episode.
Yes.
You know, it's been my continual frustration that if a movie has a great score and I want to share it with you because I love it, I can't because of all these silly YouTube rules about use and copyright and what have you. I think those rules reach total idiocy when they give people strikes or other punishments for sharing a trailer when a trailer is created to be shared, to be seen, to promote something. So anyway, I found a way around it when it comes to great movie scores. Every week from now on, we're going to add a section called, Vash, what are we calling it?
We're calling it LEW'S Backlot JUKEBOX,
in which I'm going to call your attention to one of the many brilliant scores there are out there of old movies, new movies, whatever, and give you a link to someplace where you can listen to it. We can't play it, but there are other people who, for whatever reason, can, and we can aim you in the right direction. So that, preferably not during the show, but it's up to you. But sometime when you want to put yourself in a cinematic musical frame of mind, you can play some great music and appreciate the ones that you may know or may not know or may not have heard before, from my point of view. And although I think some of the movies are to different tastes, if the music is here because I chose it, you'll like it, trust me. And we'll get to that later. But meanwhile,
yes, meanwhile, as people can probably guess by the thumbnail and by the title of this particular live stream, it's going to be all about movie props. And this is interesting, Lou, because I had mentioned the Ruby Slippers and its story on T3PO Live, and everybody was like, well, you got to bring this up with Lou. And I'm like, well, absolutely, we're going to bring this up with Lou. So this is how it made its way as the segment for this specific stream. So hopefully, Lou, you will enjoy our trip down the Yellow Brick Road as we follow what happened to at least one of the pairs of the Ruby Slippers. It's very interesting, Lou. You're going to get a real
apparently there were 6 or 7 made for the movie, of which 4 still exist. And this was about one of those 4. I do know that Debbie Reynolds famously owned one pair for her planned movie memorabilia museum, which never quite happened. But this one's a little bit funny.
It's a little bit fun for sure.
Little bit funny. Da, 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 da. Anyway, those red shoes are fake.
Make sure we get this Scott Westbrook with the $5 with the Bravo. Thank you so much, Scott. Very much appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for all of your support recently. The channel just hit new massive milestones, like 3K subscribers. And we've been getting so many great views and so much great feedback in terms of the comment section and so forth. Thank you so much for supporting the channel any way that you can. Well, here we go from CNN. Dorothy's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz were stolen 19 years later. They're finally back home. Yes, this is really interesting because it is a crazy story. This one's actually a little bit older. There have been some new developments very recently with this, but these are just one of, like Lou said, the 4 of the ruby red slippers that actually exist. Here we go. A pair of ruby slippers famously donned by Judy Garland in character as Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz has been returned to its owners years after the shoes were stolen from a museum dedicated to the actress. FBI agents, yes, the FBI was involved, on Monday reunited collector Michael Shaw with the shoes at the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. The agency said that Shaw, quote, likened the experience to a heartfelt reunion with a long-lost friend. The reunion is short-lived, though. The shoes will embark on a whirlwind journey around the world in the coming months, courtesy of heritage auctions, before they'll be sold and sent to their final home. Kansas, perhaps? Yeah, and that auction is taking place actually right now. The Garland Museum, for its part, told CNN affiliate KARE that it's working to buy the shoes for display in the museum, which is housed in Garland's restored childhood home. Minnesota state legislators are also interested in keeping the shoes at a museum. A state senator this week introduced a bill that would allocate funds to the state's historical society so it can purchase the dazzling footwear and display it at Garland's former home.
Because, of course, a state government has nothing better to do than buy an old pair of shoes with their money, taxpayer money. I mean,
Yes.
they have no urgent needs for anybody who really. Anyway, I mean, private people want to do this. That's one thing, but I don't think the state government should be involved. That's just my 2 cents.
I agree. That seems like a bid for re-election there. The slippers were stolen from the museum in 2005, but were recovered in 2018 during a sting operation in Minneapolis over shoes, according to the U.S. District Attorney Office of North Dakota. Terry Martin and Jerry Hall Salderman, both in their 70s, were separately charged with the theft. Martin pleaded guilty last year, while Salterman, who was charged just this week, maintains that he's innocent. Before Salterman was identified, Martin's lawyer said Martin's associate in the crime allegedly believed the slippers to have been made with actual rubies. The shoes are merely painted red and covered in sequins, according to the Smithsonian. Though the slippers, which Garland's Dorothy famously clicked together 3 times to send herself and her little dog too, of course, back home from Oz, aren't encrusted in gems, they're extremely valuable. The U.S. Attorney's Office of North Dakota estimated the shoes are currently worth around $3.5 million.
And by the way, there's a good guiding principle involved there for any of you who seek to collect props based on their alleged value. Remember, first of all, when we said they made 6 pair or 8 pair, whatever it is for the movie, they aren't all of the same quality. In the prop biz, there's a term called a hero prop. That means that's the one that's made to extreme tolerances for close-ups. There is the general prop for just the long shots, where it doesn't have to be quite so good. And
Right.
So we don't know which these are. Secondly, the idea that a couple of dumb crooks out there, well, they call them the ruby slippers, George. Maybe they're made from real rubies. We should steal them and find out. Yeah, good luck. Even MGM didn't spend that kind of money on a pair of shoes. But when they talk about what they're worth what somebody will buy them for. And anybody experienced with eBay or any auction knows that's no relation to the physical value of the materials involved. So,
Yes, absolutely. And did Kirk Kerkorian sell a pair of these when he bought the studio outright back in the 60s?
Well, they sold a lot of things. They had a huge auction. Somewhere
Right.
I've got the catalog of all kinds of things that they sold from the prop department. But seems to me there was a pair on display at the first MGM hotel.
I see.
But I don't know which pair that was or what.
Right. Because
what happened to them.
This gets very complicated very quickly. What's interesting is that the people who allegedly stole them were it was a former mob boss or something that may have swiped
I think
them.
we can tell if he thought they were real rubies why he was former.
Yes, that was quick.
I want to know what his mob nickname was. Dum Dum.
Yeah, dumb. Only 4 pairs of the slippers used in the film are still known to exist, as Lou mentioned. Per the North Dakota Attorney's Office, 1 pair is housed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, though they were initially mismatched. Garland's name was written on the inside of both shoes, but with different numbers, indicating that each shoe belonged to a different pair used throughout the filming. And though both shoes were covered in felt, on the bottom, to quiet the sound of Garland's footsteps as she danced on set, one slipper also showed significantly more wear than the other. It wasn't until Smithsonian experts were tasked by the FBI with confirming the authenticity of the stolen pair after their recovery in 2018 that the museum slippers found their long-lost matches. The stolen shoes were respectively marked number 1 and number 6, Judy Garland, just like the pair displayed at the Smithsonian. The 2 pairs remain mismatched, though. Smithsonian Entertainment curator Ryan Littleman told CNN. So that's a pretty interesting little journey that these shoes have been on, huh?
I tell you, not your basic floor shine. Let's put it that way.
I suppose not. Yeah, I mean it is quite interesting to see just how valuable people find these movie props at times. The auction is taking place right now, 11/7/2024, as according to this article from KDHL, and they've already amassed over $800,000. I don't know what the final bid is for these shoes, but I'm sure we'll know in the coming days what people value them for. But very interesting.
Well, to use the style of the Wiz, my boy, there are men out there with shoes that are no more valuable than your shoes. But there's one thing they've got you haven't got: provenance. And in provenance, that is the term in auctioneering and valuing and assessment of things that says they really are the real thing and you can trace them back and there's paperwork. Any of you who've ever bought, let's say it at Disneyland or some of the other places you can get such things, original art from Disney or other studios, will find a certificate that goes with it that proves, yes, this really was done in such a way that makes it real. So these certainly have provenance because they've got a whole story attached. So that would add to the value. But again, the value is all perceived value, not there's nothing physically of value about them that makes them worth that kind of money. So
yeah, we're going to go over a prop actually that in which the value was questioned, I think, by the caretakers of such an item over the years. This is a very interesting story as well. But before we move on to that story, I believe Dice Media Group has an interesting comment. Then again, Judy Garland was stunning to be in the presence of. From what I know, I have been with celebrities, and there are people that are just shockingly good looking and have a presence. Did people say that about Judy Garland?
I don't know. People always said that her talent when you were in person was even greater than it was on film. Of course, she had terrible handicaps too, which was her addiction. So I don't know, a talented lady, no doubt about it. And like I say, people say that when she sang in person, well, I've been with a few people like that. I'll tell you somebody like that. No relation in era or art form, but did a show once with, actually we did 2, I think, with Donna Summer as the guest star. And that woman just opened her mouth and that voice came out of there from somewhere with no visible effort, no visible strain, and it was like a window to another world. How she, just amazing, truly amazing to be with and experience in person. Certainly we could all say that, I hope, about some concert performer that you've seen over the years. For example, I had the pleasure of seeing James Brown twice live. And that man was just astounding too. So what can I say? There are rare, talented people. There's people who work at it and rehearse at it and spend a lifetime honing that craft, and that's great too. But there are some people for whom it just comes naturally somehow, and certainly Donna was one, and Judy was one, from what I've heard.
There are definitely people who have a presence, who seem to capture the attention of anybody in the room that they're with. It's really interesting. It's a really interesting phenomenon because not everybody has that. Some people are the wallflowers and so forth. Other people they just exude this energy that is addictive to the people around them. I have heard, actually, not to get political on this at all. I'm not one to get political, but I've heard that Donald Trump has that, where he walks into a room and everybody's like, "Whoa, that's the guy." I have no way of confirming whether that's true or not. I have been in the presence of the man himself, and I will say he definitely has something going on there, but no scientific confirmation here. That's for sure.
Well, anyway, let's prop up this conversation with another fascinating prop.
Absolutely. Before we get to that, Samuel May with $3. Thank you so much. The super sticker. Got the guy. Thumbs up there. Very much appreciated. Thank you. And as Lou mentioned, let's go ahead and get to another interesting prop. This time from Missouri, marked as a trash can. Oh, yes. This is a very, very interesting story right here. This out of Fox 2 Now. How the Death Star from Star Wars ended up as a Missouri trash can. This by Joe Mulitzer from January 9th, 2022. St. Louis, Missouri, the Death Star model used in the blockbuster 1977 Star Wars film A New Hope was used as a trash can in Missouri during the 1990s. A series of fortunate events helped keep the iconic item out of the dump. Yeah, it's interesting. So here is a picture of the Death Star prop, the original one from 1977, outside of what is basically an antique store. Not in a glass case or anything. Not in a place where you might have otherwise found it. No, it was stuck to the side here of this antique store in the middle of relatively nowhere. You wouldn't quite expect it to be there. Gus Lopez had been collecting rare Star Wars memorabilia for decades and now writes occasionally for StarWars.com. He says that his story about how the original Death Star prop was found near the Lake of the Ozarks is his top conversation piece. Many of the set pieces and models used in the original movie were stored in a facility in 1977. The studio decided that they no longer wanted to pay rent, and many of the items were to be thrown away. Todd Franklin says that he was working at a local TV station near the Lake of the Ozarks after graduating from high school. He was a cameraman on a series about local businesses when they went to the antique shop. A large gray ball in the store looked familiar to the Star Wars fan. He knew a little about movie production and suspected that it could be the original Death Star prop. But how did it end up in the middle of Missouri? That night, he played the Death Star scenes on his VCR over and over, and his suspicions grew. He went back to the antique shop the next day to talk to the store owners. They told him that they owned a storage facility in California, and some movie studios used it for storage. Filmmakers were told to pick up their items, or they would be discarded after they decided to shut the facility down. Luckily, the movers saved many of the Star Wars items. Franklin says that he tried to buy the Death Star, but did not have enough money at the time. He says that he called Lucasfilm to confirm that the Death Star model was in Missouri. They told him it was destroyed while making the movie. The antique store owners then sold the item to the owner of a country and western music show called Star World. That's quite the journey there. It eventually closed in 1993, and Franklin, still convinced that this was the actual Star Wars movie prop, arranged a meeting to buy it.
It occurs to me as we go on with this, because more and more movies are made with total computer-generated imagery and not with physical models, these things are going to diminish in existence, because in a lot of them, there never was one in the first place. So,
yes. That is such a great point, Lou. That it's going to be interesting to see with the proliferation of not just computer generated imagery, but also AI, how these things will end up changing in terms of the prop department and the manufacture of these props to begin with. Let's see, Lopez says that when Franklin and his friends got there, the shop had been liquidated. The Death Star sat in the corner and was being used as a trash can with rubbish inserted through the hole from the missing radar dish. He paid for it and strapped it to the back of a pickup truck to take it home. A look at the details revealed that this was probably the real deal. Thousands of tiny windows were scratched into the paint of the painstaking prop. They glowed when lit from inside to reveal a miniature city on the surface of the sphere. It was amazing. The friends thought it was too much of a piece of film history to sit in a Missouri home. It needed to go back home. The group contacted Lucasfilm again to see if they were interested in the 1977 Death Star Star Wars prop and negotiated on a price, but never reached an agreement. The story of the Death Star's discovery in flyover country became the stuff of legend on websites like Star Wars Collector's Archive. You can kind of see, them having a little bit of fun with it after it had made its amazing journey from, Southern California, or I should say, San Francisco, California, all the way over here. It's just absolutely incredible to see something like this be found in relatively a place like this, and then somebody actually knowing what they're looking at, going, "Hey, let's go ahead and make sure it's restored." From what I understand, it has been restored. The dish I thought was recreated and added back to the actual prop itself, and I believe it's in a glass case at this current moment. So there you go.
Nobody ever mentioned the price as far as what these various people paid. And
I don't think so. I've been trying to find that information. I can't seem to locate it. So apparently some people at some time knew what it was, knew what the value might have been, which prevented, the current owner from getting his hands on it. But
I mean, I can imagine a time, I'm sure we all can, when people would be shocked. But in our what could you call it? Our post eBay world, the assumption is always higher rather than lower, because, somebody will pay X million dollars for that. Maybe not, but anyway.
Now, what's interesting to note, this is always an interesting factoid. Apparently, the prequels featured more props, physical props, and models than the original Star Wars. A lot of people, they look at the prequel films and they see a lot of CGI. And yes, there is tons of CGI, but a lot of those items, or a lot of those sets and model shots of like building exteriors and so forth, those were actually models that were superimposed into the film itself. And perhaps to a degree that didn't make it super convincing. I think that process has really been improved.
Well, yeah, and let's remember that it isn't just that you build a really good model. It's about how you shoot it. It's about the lighting and the angles. And also, I'm sure many people have seen the pictures that were all over from Ghostbusters of them fogging those streets before the Marshmallow Man walked down them.
Right.
If it's too sharp and too clear, it doesn't look real. It looks like a model. But if there's a slight haze in the air, that helps sell it. So, and all those skills, I'm sure, to some degree are going away, although maybe not. And I say maybe not because a lot of the basically video fanfic that's around of the big franchises, Star Wars and Star Trek, a lot more of them use models than would if they were real movies, because for them, models are easier and cheaper than the computer stuff. So, yeah,
I know the team that was behind the original season of The Mandalorian were like super excited that Mando's famous ship in that first season was going to be created as a model. And they got really hyped. I know Jon Favreau and everybody else got really hyped about doing shots of it, kind of on like a wire, flying through flyby shots and so forth. And they got really geeky with it, which is kind of cool to see. Also, too, speaking of Star Wars models and so forth, I know it wasn't Dennis Leary. It was it was gentleman behind Rogue One. I can't remember his name, but there was a executive at ILM. Obviously, had been with the Star Wars team since the prequels, and he made it a point to take a lot of those original models of Star Destroyers and so forth, and then like painstakingly take them apart, scan them in 3 dimensions, and then having high quality versions of those as a reference material for Lucasfilm projects going forward. And that's why some of the Star Destroyers and so forth, they look very prop like, at least the ones featured in Rogue One, because they're literally scans of.
And yet, we were told at the beginning that how they built the original models for things like the Star Destroyers was to get a bunch of model kits, World War II tanks and things, and bust them up and stick the little pieces on and spray it all white. So a model giving birth to a model, giving birth to a model.
Isn't it great? I believe the gentleman actually talked about that. It wasn't D23. Maybe it was Star Wars Celebration, but talked about how like you said, Lou, they took model kits from all different places at the time and just kind of attached them on, somewhat haphazardly, to a lot of these original models from these Star Destroyers in order to make them.
And what's funny is now, I can imagine if you were making a new film and you were hoping for a big merch sale on it, you would have the merch production people consulting when you built one of these things, so that you didn't create something that was too hard for them to mold or too hard for them to make Legos fit to or whatever. So it's kind of talking about full circle. And it would make perfect sense to do that. So anyway.
That's a great point. I never thought about it. But
of course, all of this, I didn't either until just now, but I just thought, well, you wouldn't want to be so good that the merch people couldn't imitate it well enough. Sure. So you'd check with them. Can you do a compound angle of whatever, Right. But of course, all of this applies to sci-fi, because sci-fi is, these things are technological and therefore are easier to have sharp edges and right angles and all of that. And secondly, there's that doesn't look like because, you've seen a real Star Cruiser, have you? That this doesn't look like a real one? It's all fantasy. It's all an invention. As opposed to, let's say, the annoyance that movies have caused for years with gun nuts. And I say that affectionately, gun nuts. By using the wrong guns and for example, there have been a lot of things where, to help out the budget and the verisimilitude, you could say, they'll get a Civil War reenactor group or a Revolution reenactor group to show up in their full uniform to be the background troops in a movie. And somebody out there in fandom, thanks to the internet, hey, wait, that's not the right musket. That one didn't come in until 1779, and this bottle was in 1777. And it's like, who cares? But they care. They care very deeply. So.
Yeah, that's that is true. I know.
There was a case that comes to mind of before it even got to the movie stage, of a book being corrected by a fan, and you know what I'm talking about, of course. Yeah, I knew you didn't.
Wait a minute, what?
I'm talking about James Bond. Fleming was not really an operational agent who was out there shooting people. He was involved in intelligence. Gotcha. And he gave Bond the Beretta 22. And a guy out there in the world who was a real armorer for the Secret Service wrote to Fleming and said, no, that's a lady's gun. That's a little pop shooter. You need something with a bit more heft, and suggested the Walter. And there's that famous scene where M takes the Beretta away from him and insists that he take the Walter. So he wasn't happy to just, in the next book, change the gun and just have it happen. He wanted to make a point of it. So
I see. Well, I like that. I like that. Somebody coming out and saying, "Hey, look, maybe this isn't the best, gun that James Bond might use. Let's go ahead and switch that out with something that might be a little bit better." And then you have like a store reason for that to happen, and that's an interesting story. I like that. And of course, nobody wants to end up like Alec Baldwin. So that's the other part of the equation there. But that's old news there.
And Amnuck is asking about the famous salt shakers that were, the medical instruments for DeForest Kelley in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I knew about that. But that's the kind of thing that prop guys go look. When you're going to the local swap meet and looking for a headboard that you can revitalize, that's what they're looking for, is weird stuff like that. And really good prop people, my God, if they got a lot of stuff, they never throw anything away. And they've got everything they ever used on and they know how to alter it so it isn't too recognizable from movie to movie. Fascinating people. I know when I was in film school, I propped and set designed a lot of movies for my fellow students because I was good at finding oddball stuff like that. But again, they weren't all science fiction. Pro, thank you. He's hugging me. I don't know if that's... Well,
Yes. Thank you so much, Pro, for coming on here and providing this support. Very much appreciate that. You talk about prop guys and how, when you're going to swap meets, you want to get stuff that obviously is in line with the picture, but not be too recognizable as any one thing. I think the best incarnation of that is probably the Back to the Future DeLorean from, obviously, the 1985's Back to the Future. What's interesting is that you talk about the props and the hero prop, for instance. Now that same distinction goes with cars as well when used in some of these pictures, but they call it like the A car, B car, C car, that kind of thing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. It depends on whether you're in America or Europe. They could be different.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well,
that is.
It's just like English and American English. That car has a bonnet, regardless. So, but it's a hood over here.
Right. Well,
maybe wait a minute. If Pro, we have a brand new feature we are introing today, and in honor of your presence, and I know how valuable your time is, maybe we should do it at this point in the show.
Please, yes.
We have we have a new segment we decided to add to this show every week, because I have been frustrated, as you know, by the YouTube rules that keep people from sharing great music from movies on these shows. And so what are we calling it again? What did I come up with?
LEW'S Backlot JUKEBOX.
That's it. I am going to present a little preview of, and then not play because we'd get in trouble, but give everybody out there in the chat the URL for a place where you can go listen to one of my favorite movie scores. Right. They may be relatively new ones, relatively old ones. And today, in talking about it with Vash, he told me his favorite. And since it is one of my favorites, I think it's something we should start the ball rolling with. Because once upon a time, there was a movie from Disney. Well, I guess it was technically, was it Hollywood or Touchstone? It wasn't Disney, but based on an alternative, I guess is the word, a comic book. And that comic book was The Rocketeer. And it was set in the pre-war 30s, and it involved spies and a magical rocket belt invented by Howard Hughes, and it was great. And James Horner did the music. Now, what's interesting is this was the time when Disney, and you can go look this up and see all the pictures if you've never been there, Disney had taken over the El Capitan Theater on Hollywood Boulevard and was renovating it back to its prior deco / rococo glory. And they wanted to have an intro, basically a theme song for the theater. And you can find the link to that elsewhere too. And they just called it the El Capitan Curtain Show. But they got James Horner, who was already doing this movie, to also write them music for the theater. And it's a series of curtains that open with different lighting effects, and then the movie begins. And so in this case, the two blend seamlessly in style. And anyway, the movie is The Rocketeer. James Horner is the composer. And it sounds something like insert link here. And I'm not asking you to listen to it now because you would, if you want it in the background, swell. But this is the opening and the first takeoff of The Rocketeer.
Yep. The link is right there in the chat, as you can see. And you can listen as Lou regales us with amazing factoids about this film, because this is, we were just talking about it. This is definitely one of my favorite underrated gems right here, because I just that sense of time and place, it's so distinct. It just has just a amazing quality to it that I think a lot of it might have been a precursor for a lot of superhero movies of the day.
Well, plus it had that pulp comic book style of the day. I said to Vash earlier that I thought, as great as this movie was, the reason why it did not quite catch on and become what we both agree would have been a great franchise was that it was trying too hard to be a franchise from day one. If they had just made the best one shot they could have, it might have gone further. But it's funny. Well, the movie itself is certainly worth watching, of course, if you can find it out there, and I'm sure you can. But it had the right mix of heroism and comedy and espionage. And also, speaking of props and sets, obviously the prop for the rocket belt and helmet became, there's that awful word, an icon of this story. But they came from the art of the original comic book. One thing great about it was that they shot a lot of it, the bad guy's house, and that's Timothy Dalton, who you see in the middle there, as kind of a crooked Nazi spy version of Errol Flynn, was shot at a Frank Lloyd Wright house in LA that is currently part of a park and a museum. And it's this kind of Art Deco Mayan temple sort of house. And that's a real place. That's not sets when you see the movie. And it's a fascinating place to visit, by the way, if you go to LA. Anyway, and then you had what? Alan Arkin. There it is. You got it.
Absolutely.
What do they call it? Hollyhock or something like that?
It's the Ennis House.
Ennis House, right. But anyway, it's open, not all the time, but you can look it up and go visit. And inside, it's even more fascinating. Might have been Ryan. He asked if Lucifer was filmed there. It's a pretty commonly used movie house now, but it hadn't been when Rocketeer was made.
And I think some of the patterns that you see associated with this house, they recreated those for the restrooms in Hollywoodland, if I'm not mistaken.
Maybe.
Which in Disney California Adventure, still there. But yeah, it does definitely have a distinctive style. You can totally see it in the film Rocketeer with, oh man, who's the lead actress in that film? Why can't I think of her name?
Oh.
Hang on a second. Oh boy, Jennifer Connelly. Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, and who is a great leading lady as well. She really does carry the picture, I think, from her perspective, quite well. Especially with some of the on-screen talent that you see.
Could we say she was the Sydney Sweeney of her era?
That's not, that's not a yeah. I'll go ahead. I'll meet you. I'll meet you there. But just an incredible film.
Here,
Underrated for sure.
Aldo Casabonas is agreeing with you about the bathrooms at DCA. Anyway,
Yeah, they look just like him. Here, let me see if I can get a photo of those, because that's that's an interesting thing. There's apparently a story associated with this as well that I can't recall off the top of my head, but apparently Michael Eisner might have been getting revenge on somebody. We'll see. Give me just a second, and I'll get those for you.
They put so many real Hollywood buildings of that period into the studio in Orlando and then into DCA. Particularly in the studio in Orlando, you all, I'm sure if you've been there, are aware of that shop that has Pluto on the edge of it. Well, that's a real dog and cat hospital on Highland that has a dog, but not Pluto, obviously. And a lot of those buildings are all copies of. There's one that Sid Somebody's Antique thing at the front end, or used to be. Is a gas station on Highland. If you were in LA and you just drive up Highland between Sunset and all the way down, you'll see lots of fronts. The buildings with those big circles, that's a laundry, old laundry. One of those buildings, in fact, just a block off, was Howard Hughes's building. It's sort of his secret archives where all of his paperwork was kept. But
there's a great.
And then of course the entrance to DCA, those pylons are all from the Pan Pacific Auditorium, which used to exist.
Right.
The obvious stuff is obviously the Chinese, but there you go with the pylons of the Pan Pacific and Crossroads of the World. Exactly, doesn't have Mickey on top in the real world. Just has a globe. But I used to have a friend who lived a block from there. Go by there all the time. There.
That's so cool.
Yeah. In its time, it was billed as the world's first shopping center. So
really,
oh yeah, it got fame for that. But the idea of putting all these stores in one themed building was a new idea back then. Let's see what else they got. It's still there. You can go look at it.
Beautiful.
The dark room. Yeah. The dark room is on Wilshire Boulevard. And for a while recently, it was an Indian restaurant, but it was a camera in that classic black enameled camera style of that era.
Wild. Brian Darby, of course, which we still have to do a show on.
Yes. Well.
The Cobb salad. Very cool. Carthay Circle.
Except, like I say, that one, although prominent because of the hat, the one that is on Vine Street up near Hollywood Boulevard was much more the Hollywood hangout than this one. And that's the one they copied at DCA, not this, which is kind of surprising that they didn't actually do the Derby. But I think there was actually some sort of rights issue. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then the Carthay Circle, which is long gone, criminally long gone, because of what they put instead. That was back when National General owned that theater. And they said, well, it's kind of in an odd place. And it is. It's entirely on its own. It's nowhere near a major shopping or entertainment area, in its own little box in between Wilshire and Olympic. Or was, I should say. So they just knocked it down and built a really ugly 4-story office building as their headquarters. But it was there once. Once upon a time.
Yes, the Hollywood Gates there. That's interesting because it's right next to the Tower of Terror, which has been in the news lately, which we will cover actually on T3PO Live at 5 next week. So be on the lookout for that. And of course, the Chinese Ramen Theater, that is sort of the icon of Disney's Hollywood Studios. Kind of, sort of, maybe.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Could be.
Yeah.
It always impressed me when I first went there how accurate they were in the lobby to the real thing. Because I went to so many movies there as a kid and as a grown-up. But I think I remember the first movie I ever saw there, and there could have been others, but the one that sticks in my mind is Goldfinger.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's a great venue to see that picture as well. I've always wanted to see a movie there. I've only walked past it, so that might be a little bit of a bucket list item now. Carthage Circle, for those of you who don't know, also too was the original home of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, as it made its premiere in 1937. So that's why it's been used prominently in architecture featured at Disney parks all around the world. Now, also a facade in Shanghai, if I'm not mistaken. So very interesting.
And you
stuff
have to
there.
remember that Spanish/Italian/mission style building,
right?
And making both churches and theaters and public buildings have a tower. Well, think of the tower. Those of you, I'm sure, know the Beverly Hills City Hall from Beverly Hills Cop. Same idea, same. And schools also all over LA have that same style, as a tribute to the original explorers of California.
So great stuff. So, awesome history, and it's like you said, why there's such a proliferation of that style throughout Los Angeles and Southern California. That's the intention. There is to listen while we talk, and also too endemic of the style of or emblematic of the style featured in the Rocketeer, that kind of 1920s, 1930s Art Deco style, very prominently featured in a lot of the facades at Disney California Adventure or even Disney's MGM Studios. Pretty cool stuff.
You have to remember
awesome.
that LA grew from basically a nothing little cow town because of the movie industry.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were other industries, especially aerospace and, lots of manufacturing. And then it grew again after World War II, primarily because a whole lot of guys went through LA, San Diego, San Francisco, certainly, on their way to serve in the Pacific. And a lot of them were from the Midwest, and a lot of them were going through there in, December, January, and saying, wait, it's not snowing, and the land is cheap, and the houses are cheap. I think I'll come about this far back and no further when I come back, if I come back.
Sure.
And so what were orange fields became housing, and, a lot of famous people made a lot of money on real estate in those days.
Oh,
most notably Bob Hope.
Yeah,
who basically owned about half of the San Fernando Valley at one point. And anyway,
so many people made their money in California real estate. Insane. Also, California oil fields. So much stuff. Just absolutely incredible.
And then, of course, agriculture further up in the valley.
Yes.
But anyway.
And hopefully it gives you, as you're listening to the music of the Rocketeer, it puts you in that time of place because it's definitely emblematic of that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So cool. Well, that's some incredible Hollywood history that we've covered over there. We do have a question from one of the people actually in the chat right now, Aldo. He sent us a question via t3ponline@yahoo.com, which anybody can send a question through. There's a lot of personal information listed here, so I don't want to feature all of that. but apparently he is trying to break into the industry as an actor or performer. Do you have any tips on how to do that, Lou?
No. Look, first of all, I don't know where you are physically, and certainly the business is everywhere. But this is what I tell friends who have kids who want to do this. You got to be there. And that's tough because it's an expensive place to live.
Yeah.
But you got to be available when somebody has a call for something that might be right for you. You can't say, I'll be there in 3 days because it's over. It's gone. You missed it.
Right.
Secondly,
Availability.
you just try and work as much as you can, whether it's in little theater or short films. On the genre guys this week, yesterday, we were doing a film about a high school, and the guy who played the principal of the school was a guy I knew because when I was at USC making student films, there was this core group of people who basically tried out for every student film there was. And other people thought they were crazy, but they were smart because he built a whole career out of these kinds of small parts because he got seen in these movies. Because when they said, well, we'd like some film on you, the other people said, well, I don't have any. And he said, well, I've got this student film that I did. And so there was a core at that time of maybe 6, 8 actors I can think of who all worked regularly the rest of their lives. They didn't become Pacino, but they worked on a consistent basis. Another character in that movie that plays Reese Witherspoon's mother in the movie, somebody said, gosh, Lauren said, gosh, her face is familiar. Where do I know her from? And it was a woman named Colleen Camp who did over 100 movies and TV shows because she just always worked. And she started out as a bird trainer at Busch Gardens. And somebody saw her because she was being funny. And, well, you might know her best if you've ever seen the movie version of Clue, the game, you know. She's the French maid in that. But the point is, you got to be seen. You got to be in somebody's mind's eye when they're saying, well, who can we get to do that? Yeah. Well, I'm reading more from Aldo here about a student visa, and I have no idea how all that works nowadays. Anyway.
Yeah, apparently, if I can reveal a little bit more about Aldo, apparently he is in the general area of Hollywood, so he's already got that taken care of. I think, like you said, availability is key. You know, when a role comes, you got to be willing to go out there, fight for it, take it if you can, and if you're available. That's, I think, is very
well, you know, and also I'll give you another insight. I've mentioned before that my mom was a pretty busy actress in radio. And in her later years, and I say that like she's gone, she's not. Thursday will be Mom's 97th birthday. But in her later years, she decided she got an agent because a friend of hers did and decided to go out for commercials and things. And she knew that I was, among other things, a director. And so when she'd be going out on an audition, she would ask me, well, what do they want? Here's what it says. What should I be? And the answer is they don't know. The answer is they don't have a clue until they see it. And there were so many times when she got the part, and by the time she went to the shoot, it had totally changed. Originally, she was cast to be the shopkeeper lady in the place where the family in the commercial was buying something, and she wound up, I forget what it was, but it was something entirely different. They had totally rewritten the commercial, but they'd cast these people in these age groups and these looks, so they made it work. So,
wow.
So that's why I would say, don't go assuming that the part they called you for is the only one, and try and show them a range so that they say, well, I don't know about him for that one. That guy we just saw was better, but what about for this one? You know,
That's a good point.
There's always an opportunity out there. And then be ready. Be on time, know your lines, be professional. I know lots of people. It was once estimated that in the 165,000 person membership of SAG-AFTRA, Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Radio and Television Artists, the acting unions, that about 2,500 people made 90% of the revenue. Now, sure, some of that 90% is the big ticket people, but still, you may not be the best actor in the history of the world. But if you show up on time, you know your lines, and you're reliable, and you don't wander off, and you pay attention, people will get to know you, and ADs and casting people are your ticket in. You may never get a big part, but you might get a whole lot of little ones that'll pay your rent and satisfy your creativity. So
that is so interesting about various roles and how maybe, you know, you don't fit that part, but maybe you fit another. I know Cillian Murphy.
You might fit. You might fit. Just they don't see it in you that day.
Right.
Know?
That's a great point as well. There's a famous story of Cillian Murphy trying out for the Bruce Wayne part for the original Batman Begins, and obviously later the Dark Knight trilogy. Before Christian Bale was cast for the role, he tried out, didn't quite work for Bruce Wayne himself, but they were able to obviously incorporate him in Scarecrow, and then later, you know, was a notable player for future Christopher Nolan productions.
Right.
All that leading to Oppenheimer. So you just kind of never know where these things are going to go.
And by the way, if you were just abstractly coming in from the sky and saying, well, Robert Oppenheimer and the Scarecrow, same actor, people would say, are you crazy? Those are totally different. But he made it work. So
that's for sure. Jan Monroe actually featured this earlier in the chat when we were talking about Art Deco style and everything. And one of the most notable uses of that style being the Tim Burton's Batman. And I had to agree with her. There's some really interesting set pieces and so forth that were constructed and made.
Well, the question then
the
becomes, however, Burton's version is always that off-center sort of version, you know, always that abstract and oddball stuff version. So the question becomes, what's more effective for Batman? Is it him in a world as weird as he is? Or is it weird him in the straight 30s world?
Right.
Like, not completely like, but more like, the Dark Knight movies. So I don't know.
Yeah. That's an interesting question because there are definitely two minds of that. I never really thought of it that way, but you're right. I will say this. I think this version lends itself better to animation, which some people feel the Batman animated series, the definitive version of the character. But there is definitely a tone and a style created by those Christopher Nolan films in which, he is definitely removed, I would say, from the world around him in such a manner that he's special in that world, let's say, for lack of better terminology. Very, very interesting. Yes, and they played fast and loose with that Josh Hammond, like you said, in the video games and so forth. It's interesting. I think this is also one of the only instances that I can reference where, like, the iconography featured in the set pieces and the time period being the Art Deco style was actually incorporated into the suit of Batman. There is some, I believe it's maybe the second suit that was used in Batman Returns. But if you look at some of the details, like, really closely, which you really can't make out on screen, you could see that that they make use of that Art Deco style even into the suit design itself. I'm gonna get some photos for you. And by the way, Lou is gone, but that's all right. He's probably maybe having some connection issues. I know we've been having some trouble out there in his neck of the woods when it comes to the connection. So he'll be back on, I'm sure. Let me see here if I can actually get you that suit. It was really, really interesting. Let me see here. Yeah, you can kind of see it in this photo. It's going to be hard to see, guys, because it's black and it's blown up, but you can kind of see some of that Art Deco style actually being used in the bat suit. You can see how it's the chest piece there is carved almost like a statue more than it is emulating the human form. So that's kind of what we're talking about right there, how the art style for a particular picture actually influences many key aspects of the film itself, sort of like the how the Rocketeer did. That was kind of interesting. Looks like Lou's trying to give me a call right now. I could see if I can incorporate him on the show. I don't know if I can, but let me see here if that's at all possible. Lou, you are on the show via phone.
Huh?
You're on the show. You're on the show via the phone here. I do have you connected.
Oh, good. Okay. It's for some reason stream rated its silliness again, frozen up. Here I am.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you're trying to make it your way back on to the show if you can. Are you able to? Are you down completely?
I'm nothing is happening on my browser at all. Start froze and then everything else froze and grr said English. But anyway, I'm able to jury rig this way if you make it happen.
I don't know why it's dropped. I'm not sure. Okay. All right. Well, don't worry. I got a few things that we can bide our time with. I'll tell you what. If you're not back on in about, I would say 15 minutes, we'll go ahead and close up the show early. How about that, Lou?
All right. Whatever you want to
do. No problem. I'll be right back here. Thank you, Lou. We'll see you shortly if you can. Go ahead and end the call there. Okay, so we're trying to get Lou back on, guys. Sorry, this is a live show. Sometimes it's how it works right here, but that's quite all right. As I was saying before, though, some of you already know the story if you've been watching 2-3PO Live, but others maybe not familiar with the story. It's interesting because we were talking about film props and so forth, and how and just how noteworthy they are in the lexicon of media entertainment, the zeitgeist, and so forth. We were talking about the Back to the Future DeLorean and how Lou was actually bringing up how it's interesting when these prop guys actually go out there, they try to source material and different props and so forth in order to reuse them in something like a sci-fi picture like Back to the Future, but not have them be so distinct that, you know, people obviously know what they are. I think no better example of this might be for the DeLorean time machine featured in Back to the Future itself. There are so many parts and pieces that were utilized from machinery and vehicles from World War II, stuff that looked like, you know, nuclear fusion stuff, and all this kind of stuff that were basically tacked onto the back and the interior of the Back to the Future time machine right there. Unfortunately, you know, for the A car featured in Back to the Future, it didn't fare all that well, as it was actually used as a prop that people could see on the studio tour. Well, if you know about the studio tour, you know that a lot of those cars are actually stored outside, which, let me see if I can actually find some reference material here. Studio tour. it was so tragic to see this, because for years, here we go, for years it was stored outside in the sun and the weather, and exposed to the elements. And unfortunately, you can actually see how the original DNC or DMC emblem was actually removed from the front of the vehicle. You can see that various parts and pieces were actually pilfered from it, which was really unfortunate to actually see. Again, this is the hero car, or the A car used in the filming of Back to the Future 1, 2, and 3, and it just didn't fare all that well. There were what is it, like raccoons and so forth, and squirrels living inside of it at one point. It was just treated very, very badly, and fortunately, Universal did spend the money to actually get it lovingly restored. You can actually see that restoration process and more of the history about this specific vehicle on the Out of Time documentary that was produced on this. You can still pick up Blu-rays of it today. I would highly recommend it, because man, oh man, is it just an interesting and fascinating history to cover what happened to it, how it got into that state, and what they did to actually restore it. They got a whole bunch of Back to the Future DeLorean makers, essentially, people who actually build Back to the Future DeLoreans in their spare time and their hobbies and so forth, or they have cars themselves that they convert DeLoreans, that is, into the Back to the Future model, and they were able to get the best and brightest of that whole ilk, so to speak, and actually embark on the restoration process at great expense. By the way, a lot of love and care was actually taken with this specific vehicle. They even were able to source some of the original components that had been pilfered from the car over the years. They put out a big call saying, "Hey, look, listen, if you can, please, if you've found, how do they word it, in your current collection, if you found that you may have had or own some of the pieces taken from this car over the years, whether you did it or not, could you go ahead and send those back, please? No consequences, no questions asked." And they were able to get some of those parts back. Yeah, Mr. Fusion Amnok, I know you mentioned it before. That kind of goes into the prop philosophy of how different items can be used for props. And the Mr. Fusion coffee machine that was used for the back of the DeLorean time machine in Back to the Future is probably one of those most notable examples where sometimes if you're doing something, here you go, here's a picture of that. If you're doing something and you want to kind of maybe you want it to represent something else, in this way, it's like, okay, what if this coffee proprietor or coffee maker manufacturer got so big that they were actually creating these fusion generators for vehicles in 2015. That's one of those things where it's like you kind of want it to stand out just a little bit in order to create maybe a lore or backstory for that particular picture. That's an interesting thing as well. Matt B with a comment here, Vash, you should check out the Expedition Back to the Future documentary. A lot about DeLorean and other props from the movie. Yeah, that's some good reference material as well. I believe I'm familiar with that, but I'll go ahead and check it out regardless, because I actually love Back to the Future, the lore and so forth. Also, too, it's interesting, if you look at the 2015 version of Hill Valley, right, that's featured in Back to the Future 2, you can see there's a lot of Asian influence there. And I believe they even make reference to this in Back to the Future 3 when they're trying to put back the DeLorean time machine, and obviously Doc has stored it for 100 years in order to send Marty from 55, where he's stuck, to 85. Anyway, they're going through the parts and pieces of it, and Doc picked out a particular piece and says, "Oh man, I can't believe this whole thing was caused by this one piece, and it was made in Japan." And Marty says, "What are you talking about? All the best stuff is made in Japan." Apparently the filmmakers very much believed at the time that they were making Back to the Future movies 2 and 3 that Japan would take over as the dominant economy on the world stage, and we would see a lot of Japanese influence because of that. So that's why when you look at the 2015 version of Hill Valley, you have a lot of Asian influence there. And this was a predominant theory throughout Hollywood. So you actually see this in Die Hard, for example, right? Nakatomi and all that. That was referencing that idea that the Japanese would kind of take over there. Blade Runner also too makes reference to this. So that's an interesting idea. We were talking about Spanish mission influence or Art Deco. That's an idea where, some filmmakers attempting to predict the future are basing their thought processing on current events at the moment. But back to the DeLorean time machine right here. Yeah, they were able to lovingly restore this, and it was it's an incredible process. You really got to check out this documentary because it really kind of goes over how they were able to lovingly restore this vehicle. I will say, it probably shares very little of the original parts because to that A vehicle, because so many of them had been degraded. But I know the stainless steel panels, those were lovingly restored. Parts of the engine, there's a lot there. It's not to say that it's all replaced, but so much of it had to be because Universal left it out for all those years. Now they actually have it. I think its permanent residence is technically in a museum, but they have actually toured with this vehicle at various parts and so forth on the lot itself. It's made appearances at the Universal Studios Hollywood theme park and so forth. So you could still see it if you're lucky enough. But it was great to see something so iconic from cinema's past be so lovingly restored and taken care of. And that's kind of the theme of the entire show right here. There's still value in a lot of those original works from years past, like The Wizard of Oz, or 1977 Star Wars, or Back to the Future, or The Rocketeer, right? With its iconic music that is so amazing. So there you go. Also, too, I want to go ahead and end on this one note here. I don't know if you guys have ever seen these top 10 or top 20 lists of movie props, but boy, oh boy, are they're kind of terrible. Lou and I were kind of going back and forth over them before the show, and we were just like, wow, these are really terrible. Like this top 20 list from MovieWeb. And I'm sorry, Federico. Okay, I know you probably worked in this article, and I don't mean to tear your stuff up entirely, but this is, these are some questionable things in here. Like Freddy's glove is top 20 movie props of all time. I don't know about all that. Maybe, McLovin's driver's license, Superbad. A lot of people haven't even seen Superbad. How is it on a top 20 list? I'm not quite sure about that. The briefcase from Pulp Fiction, I suppose it's iconic. Greatest of all time? Not sure about that. Thor's hammer. You could probably get away with putting that up higher. 17 there, Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Book of the Dead, Evil Dead. I'm not. Nope, not that. The One Ring, Lord of the Rings. How is that in 15? That should probably be top 10 right there. I would also include maybe some ones from Harry Potter in that as well. The Leg Lamp, Christmas Story. Okay. All right. Maybe 14 perhaps. Charlie Chaplin's Kane. Charlie Chaplin's filmography. Maybe. Possibly. Wilson, Castaway. 12. Perhaps. The Great Bambino's Baseball Bat, The Sandlot. I'm not thinking so. Flying Bike, E.T. Yeah, top 10. I don't know. I could think of probably 3 or 4 things from Steven Spielberg films that would probably be higher on this list right here. The Red Balloon, It, 2017. Moving on. Annabelle, The Conjuring Universe, this is 8? Come now, son. That's ridiculous. The Ruby Slippers are number 7 on this list. That's wild to me. That is crazy. That's got to be in the top 5. Easily, for sure. The Fedora, Indiana Jones franchise. Yeah, okay, top 6. You know what? That could live there. That's an interesting idea. There's some great stories about the Fedora, and we should probably have Lauren Connor on to talk about the notable history of the Fedora featured in the Indiana Jones franchise. It's interesting. Obviously, when going over the Indiana Jones franchise and how it was, creatively thought of, it was Steven Spielberg and George Lucas's take on the James Bond films. That's kind of where the genesis of the Indiana Jones character lives, which is kind of funny because, well, James Bond would eventually fittingly play, I might say, Harrison Ford's father in Last Crusade, which, is fitting if you think of the genesis of the Indiana Jones franchise. But the hat is really, really interesting because obviously they went to a hat maker for the original Raiders of the Lost Ark hat, but they used other makers for the hats that were featured later on in the franchise. So there are some people who can see the hat or the fedora featured in the Indiana Jones franchise and know what specific scene that they came from, like which hat that is, and they in some cases they do change from scene to scene. And so there's a particular hat maker who makes the hats out of beaver pelts. I believe it's in the Washington area up north there. Anyway, you can actually request, if you're getting a hat from them, which scene you want, for example. So probably a lot of people go with the iconic Raiders scene that you're actually seeing on screen right now. But I know Lauren Connor knows about this as well. It's crazy, but yeah, apparently beaver pelt is what you want to use there. And in fact, that hat maker was so good that for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas haven't been on the game so long. They were trying to recreate a lot of that iconic imagery for that film, so that it would obviously have that continuity between the original trilogy and that new film. Anyway, they went to that hat maker and said, hey, can you make us 20 hats for the production? And so sometimes these people who are fans of these films, who create these replicas of props and so forth, can be done so well that actually the filmmakers can actually go out there and request stuff from them and know that it's going to be on screen or movie accurate. Interesting. There was another instance in which this happened with the original Mandalorian, season 1. The finale of that season 1 series, where you have all those stormtroopers being seen on screen behind Moff Gideon there as they're about to corner Mando, Gina Carano's character, and so forth in that bar that they have taken a residence in on that backwater planet there. Anyway, you see all those stormtroopers there. A lot of those are actually 501st members. They are not extras in that production, but they were actually called to service, literally, for that scene, because obviously Jon Favreau, working with a reduced budget there, is looking to present the most amazing cinematic scenes that they possibly could. And in that instance, when they needed a bunch of stormtroopers but didn't have a lot for costuming and extras and so forth, it was hey, let's call up the 501st, because they have movie accurate stormtrooper costumes that we can use for these productions. And so every single one of those 501st members' costumes or stormtrooper armor were all screen used after that point. So, sometimes those prop makers, they're pretty good. But yeah, okay, number 6. DeLorean, number 5. I would rank it myself higher, but 5 seems to be suitable right there. The Lament configuration, Hellraiser 1987. Number 4, no way. Not a chance. The Talk Boy, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. My brother actually had a Talk Boy growing up. That was a fun piece of kit right there. Not number 3, though. Hannibal's Mask, Silence of the Lambs, number 2. Probably not number 2, but you can make an argument. Top 20 for sure. And the lightsabers in Star Wars from 1977 to 2023. Probably. In fact, I've actually got a lightsaber right here for you. So there you go. So yeah, there you go. That's the list right there. I don't know if I would have gone with that myself personally, but who knows? Yeah, Jane Monroe, probably cheaper to remake the car. Yes, I would say very much cheaper to replace the car. In fact, there is a DeLorean Back to the Future. It's like a website in which you can actually order one. Basically a DNC or DeLorean converted car to the time machine model for like, I think it's like $80,000 or something like that. Like it's actually pretty reasonable, and they will construct them in any way you wish. So yeah, probably far more a far cheaper investment to replace it. But hey, if you have the A car used in the film, well, that is obviously irreplaceable. Well, that just about wraps our show up right there. Sorry about Lou being, whisked away because of the those internet gremlins right there. Very much apologize. But I know he would want to feature this, and we're going to go ahead and feature it. We have on T3PO right now, or that pod place, we have episode 29 of the Genre Guys. We've been trying to catch up because we took a little bit of a hiatus from the show, and that's only because we've been very, very busy here in the studio. But we're back in a regular cadence every single Saturday. You can expect these shows. In this case, Gunga Din 1939 is going to be the episode 29 featured here. An amazing film that, man, is quite interesting to look back on. And as the title suggests, is actually the precursor to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, as Lauren astutely points out in that show. How so? Well, you gotta listen to the show to find out. But Cary Grant, Victor McLaughlin, I believe is how you say that, and Douglas Fairbanks. You know what? Don't be too harsh there. Henry got it wrong too in his episode. You'll have to listen to that. But an amazing piece that I don't know if it stood the test of time completely, but it definitely is a time capsule, and one that is worth at least reflecting on, if not outright watching. I would definitely recommend to watch if you can get your hands on a copy. And we have a lot of images sourced from the actual film itself featured in that as well. I believe there's only over 400 images featured in the Genre Guys episode 29 right there of Gunga Din. Very, very cool. Also, too, we have Hollywood Backlot every single Sunday, the show you're watching right now, at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can go ahead and expect that. And T3PO live at 5 on Thursdays at, what is it? Right? Yeah, it's following Mr. H's show. So I think that's been really, really cool. You guys have been phenomenal, keeping up with times and so forth for our show. So thank you so much for keeping up with us and our content output. I know, it's all hands on deck. And by the way, Thursday is going to be particularly interesting because we have the Disney earnings call earlier that day as well. So expect coverage on that Park Place, on the WW Pro Show, and on that Pod Place, the channel you're watching right now, going over a lot of the that earnings call, because that's going to be delivered to us in the morning. So that's going to be very, very interesting. Coming up for the Genre Guys, I know Lou is probably going to want to. Oh, here we go. Lou is coming back on now, so maybe he'll show us. He'll talk about what is in store for us. That might be pretty cool. But I know they just saw the movie Election, and apparently an interesting response from Lauren Connor and Henry Tables, who had not seen it before. That's very interesting. Gunga Din, by the way, being a movie that none of them had seen previously. That's pretty cool as well about all that. But let's see if we can get Lou back on. I think he's ready for us.
I am.
Lou,
Sorry
what do you got
about
coming
that,
out of
everybody.
genres?
Oh, golly. Well, I see you've got Gunga Din, folks.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never seen this, turn it on and prepare yourself for the days when there was no such thing as CGI masses of soldiers. It was all bodies out there.
Yeah.
This is a huge, huge, huge movie. I mean,
Massive.
God, it's big. And it's great besides. But Lauren was interested because Lauren is a major fan of Indy and the Temple of Doom. And a lot of that came from this. Indeed, you'll see that the guy who's the bad guy leader of the Thuggee cult in this very strongly resembles Mola Ram in Temple of Doom. And yeah, there he is. Evil bastard. Anyway,
But so many extras. So many extras.
God. It's astounding, the size of this movie. Look at that's all real guys. And that's like half of the good guys. And anyway, it's a great movie. Great movie. And what we say about it is nice too. But we just did election for the elections. And we're about to do, before that we did Sleepy Hollow for Halloween. And next up is Get Shorty.
Yep.
And after that, we haven't quite decided. We've got a whole list that we're going to put in order of importance or lack of importance. But
I can tell you the next film on here on 2 through 10.
Yes, which is
your favorite, Lou. It's Battlefield Earth.
Oh my God! Oh my God! That was Tommy's pick, and it's a great stinker, you know. So
yeah,
you have to respect the stinkers too. But I can tell you some of the ones that are on our list, not the order yet, but A Boy and His Dog, which is Don Johnson in a Harlan Ellison story about post-apocalyptic soldiers who each one has its own dog who he telepathically talks to help him sniff out the enemy. And Jason Robards does the voice of the dog. And when I saw the film at a preview that Harlan and the producers gave down at USC Cinema, the kind of stupid questions film students ask, somebody in the audience said, Mr. Ellison, in the book, you never mentioned the breed of the dog. How did you choose this particular dog to play the dog? And he smiled and said, just like anything else in Hollywood, he screwed the producers. Oh
no.
Yeah, he was a character. He was a character. Then we have, let's see, again, this is in no order, but just to give you an idea of the variety of things we're going to explore. Brannigan, which is John Wayne as an American cop in London, which is a lot of fun for the fish out of water crowd. Then we're going to look at Casablanca, which I was at first reticent to do because I thought everybody's seen it and analyzed it, and what can we bring new to the party? And yes, we can bring lots of new stuff. Next, I tried to pick something representative of a series that was much beloved and much made with 3 different actors in the title role over the years, and that is the Charlie Chan movies. But I picked one with Warner Oland, the famous Swedish Chinese detective, who was a big hit as Charlie Chan. And I picked this one, which is Charlie Chan at the Opera, because the bad guy is Boris Karloff. And then we're going to do, well, not then, but in Our Man Flint, of course, the classic spy spoof. And speaking of spy spoofs, we're also at some point going to do the Dean Martin, Matt Helm movies. And then for one of the very best John Wayne movies with also Kirk Douglas and other great people, In Harm's Way. And we were talking about movie scores earlier. Jerry Goldsmith, who did this movie, is in the movie at the beginning. The movie begins on the night of Pearl Harbor, and he's playing the band leader at the big party for the Admiral's wives at the beginning. Then we've got on this list of mine, which is the ones I've made thumbnails for so far, How to Murder Your Wife, which if you haven't seen it, oh, it's such a treat. It's Jack Lemmon and Terry Thomas, and it's just one of those charming, ultimate 60s, 70s domestic comedies. And then talk about comedy, something totally out there. Would you believe Peter Sellers and Ringo Starr in The Magic Christian? If you have never heard of it, oh, the Monty Python guys are in it too, back before they were Monty Python. Let's see. Then there's this little movie that's always been a favorite of mine that nobody seems to know about, called The Silent Partner, which is Elliot Gould is a bank teller at a bank in a huge mall in Toronto, Canada, for Christmas. And a guy comes in a Santa Claus suit and starts to hand a note, but then decides to run away. And Gould finds the note, and it says, put all the money in the bag. It's a bank robber dressed as Santa. And Gould thinks to himself, well, you know, if he comes back, he's going to do the same thing again. And nobody will know how much money he took, but the bank afterwards. So he puts that next day, thinking he might come back, he puts some of his till in another place. The guy comes in, and it's Christopher Plummer playing the nastiest, sickest, evilest guy you've ever met. And he says, put the money in the thing, and he does. And he goes home and finds out that according to the news, he stole, I think it's $85,000. But according to what he got, he stole $65,000. And he figures out that Gould took the rest of it and can get away with it. So the two of them begin a battle of menace and wits to solve it. And along for the ride, the lovely Susanna York. Next one would be Assault on a Queen. Assault on a Queen. The queen in question is the Queen Mary, and it's not the queen, it's the ship, the ocean liner. And it's Frank Sinatra and Alf Kjellin and Tony Franciosa, and they have an old World War II German U-boat, and they're going to pretend to be the Canadian Navy and stop the Queen in mid-seas and rob her. And we'll see how that goes. With Oscar Peterson doing the music, by the way. And anyway, then we have Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which you probably know, with Michael Caine and Steve Martin as Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And then The Seahawk with Errol Flynn. And then Sinbad, the Sailor, with Douglas Fairbanks. And then Singin' in the Rain and Zorro, the original with Tyrone Power. So that's just what's on the immediate agenda. And I think for Christmas, one of my all-time favorite, mostly unknown movies, which is not really a Christmas movie, but it is a movie that kids and adults could enjoy together, about the mysterious, the elusive, the magical little town of Wuldercan, and what happens to it when the circus comes to town. And it is called The Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe. And all seven of those faces are played by Tony Randall. And Barbara Eden is in it. And it's a special little movie, a magical little movie. Wow. So there's an idea of some of the things you can look forward to when the genre guys get together. And of course, we've already done if it's 3 months ahead, that's another 12 movies you haven't shown yet since. So lots of great stuff. And of course,
great stuff.
Our theme song is Buy the Disc, so they can't trigger warning or edit for sensitivity you out of the great original experience. And build a library and have something that your kids and your grandkids and their kids and grandkids will enjoy for these many years to come. Because you have to remember, when these movies, most of them originally came out, when you went to see it at the theater, that was the one and only time you were ever going to see it. They weren't on television. They weren't on home video. They weren't on streaming or cable or whatever. it was watch it once and enjoy. Now we have the great luxury of having them as treasures forever. So take advantage of that. And we'll give you some things to look for and all that sort of thing. Anyway.
What I do with my Blu-rays now, or even my DVDs for that matter, I have a Blu-ray drive on my computer, and we'll go ahead and preserve those for all time. So they're on drives, man, because that physical media, you just never know what might actually end up happening.
Right.
So very good stuff right there. And by the way, I almost missed the Mum Super Chat. I very much apologize, good sir. I was going to get back to this after our segment, and then, things happen. So I very much apologize. Want to make sure we hit this with $4.99. Between 1995 and 2010, graphics processors for PCs changed every 3 months. I know, it was crazy. Then in 2016, 2020 was another graphic boom. During those times, hard to keep up. Yeah, I can tell you right now, the graphics card, I don't even know what precipitated this, but the graphics card featured in my PC right here, not the 4090 that I have in there right now, but the 3090 was actually really hard to come by because of the issues with COVID and so forth. And then we had the mining issue in which people, let's say in China and a lot of other areas, were buying up all the cards in order to mine them for Ethereum and other things.
Really?
Yeah, and it was super hard to get graphics cards, and that's why the price went up. I mean, I think the 3090 at that time when I bought it was around $2,000, and that's only because the demand for that kind of stuff was just so high. Now we have the AI boon, so a lot of people are buying graphics cards in order to use them for artificial intelligence purposes and large language models and so forth. So it's
what also got its own separate market as far as parts?
Yeah.
It was small screens. And the reason I know that is we bought a pachinko machine, the Japanese pinball things, and they all now have a little, like a tablet-sized screen mounted horizontally. And when you shoot certain things, little animation comes on. And we found a guy that was selling them, and he said, yeah, they're harder and harder to get because people are tearing them apart for the screens to put in cheap tablets. That was at the dawn of the big rush for everybody wanted a tablet. So anyway.
It's crazy. It's insane. There are some things that will just become scarce or hard to come by because of one reason or another, and it just really takes everybody by surprise. And I know during 2020 that happened quite a few times with various parts and so forth. And Windows was like, hey, if you want Windows 11, you're gonna have to have a new PC. Disaster. Anyway, Lou, thank you so much for coming back on and taking us through.
Sorry about that, gang. I don't know what happened, but all of these programs didn't want to play with each other today all of a sudden. So
I'm glad you worked out
by way of StreamYard and Slack and I don't know, probably Windows 10 and 9 and 8 and 7 and 3 and good old DOS. Remember DOS? That was there is a very funny clip, guys, if you can find it. A friend of mine actually sort of sneaked it out to the world. Years ago, he was one of the head editors at CBS in New York. When Connie Chung interviewed Bill Gates for the first time, let's just say she didn't do her homework too well, because the first question she asked after she shook his hand and sat down across his desk was, so you're the guy that invented DOS? For real. And
wow.
He just smiled and went on. But yeah, don't get a dose from Bill Gates. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
But anyway,
that's a great joke, Lou. Oh boy. Well, hopefully that kept you entertained, guys. And Lou, you
what'd
coming
you
back
do while I was gone? I'll
worth
have
it.
to watch it later and find out, huh? Yeah.
Well, we went over a little Batman. We went over a little Back to the Future DeLorean. We also went over one of those top 20 lists of movie props, and
They
There
were
are
all
some-
awful, weren't they?
Oh, they're so bad, Lou. What is going on? Well, I'm glad that we are bringing a lot of this information about classic film and the golden age of Hollywood and so forth to the masses via Hollywood
Well,
Backlot with Lou and you. It's been
I
a
happen
pleasure.
to own a favored personal prop, so maybe we should close with that.
Ooh.
When I began work on a certain sitcom at Universal, it was right after the passing of Alfred Hitchcock. And they just hand things out willy-nilly at the studios. And I was entitled to a personal parking place. And I pulled into it, and guess whose sign was still on it? Alfred Hitchcock.
Ooh.
Which that sign disappeared into my trunk rather quickly. And today lives here. I don't know if I showed it to you or not. I don't remember. But anyway,
next time I come over, I got to see it.
Because I've got the other one I've got is the one they put in for me. And I keep threatening I'll get one of these framer guys to make me a shadow box of the two of them
Shadow box for
together.
it.
But that's kind of a fun, it's just a piece of wood with his name painted on it and a couple of metal stakes to show it in the dirt. But anyway, that's a prop
great.
worth keeping.
Yes. I know you have a lot of cinematic memorabilia yourself there, but we'll leave that for another time. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for Hollywood Backlot with Lou and you. Very much appreciate everybody sticking with us in the chat. And
hope you like the music. We'll have more next time, too. And
Absolutely.
Onwards into the future.
Onwards into the future. If you like this video, please like this video. If you can share us out, that helps us out greatly with the YouTube algorithm. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And we'll see you next time on Hollywood Backlot with you, with Lou and you, and also to Be Alive. Thanks, everybody. See you later.